3, 2, 1. Yo, what's going on, guys? It's Harrison, and we're back with episode 6 of the CASACast. I'm obviously myself, Harrison, and I'm joined by...
My name's Kayleigh, I run socials, and I'm in my final year of my Masters of Architecture, and we have a special guest.
My name is Jovanoski. I'm a freelance graphic designer from Perth.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So James was studying last year, and he finished, which is why he's freelance now, and we just wanted to invite him on to bring in like more DB related courses, because while we are an architecture club, you will work with a lot of our DB graduates and throughout your career. Man, this is not too early.
You're completely on it, and it's good too because we met James in the computer labs. That's how we ran into each other. Well, if that's how you're going to meet people is through your encounters in industry, and in this case in the computer labs. So it's good to
I think in my final year I probably made friends with more architecture students than I probably did, because all of our classes are on the polar opposite side of the campus.
What were your classes?
I think they're the 208. We've got quite a few Mac labs, but I think compared to this building here, I think also compared to the environment, being around some of you that were just like very curious and interested in lots of different types of things, was a really productive environment for me to be around, especially when I was sort of like kind of doing my work, but at the same time also kind of looking into other things as well. We've got the makerspace down here, so I've been toying around there with sort of stuff, and you just kind of, I think it's a big part of the reason why you actually come to a college to study design is so you can actually meet people like yourself. So
for sure.
Yeah.
How are you going now that you don't kind of have that culture anymore?
It is a little bit more isolating. I mean, it's like overworking yourself, underworking yourself sometimes. But personally, I do kind of miss more of a collaborative work environment.
That's definitely why that's why I'm here today, because it is a tuition-free week. So please make sure you use this time to rest up. This is probably going to go out next week because I'm lazy and I kind of want to release them on Tuesday, keep it consistent. So we'll try and have it out next week. But I had words.
Yeah, well, you're kind of on it there. I'm curious about what kind of work you're doing now that you've finished. Should we talk about what work? Because Harrison and I only saw kind of snippets of the work that you're finishing up, especially your final project with all the AI stuff. It's super interesting. If you want to talk a little bit to that, and Harrison, I'm sure, will put in some imagery for people.
Yeah, we can start there. Maybe we'll go to the first part of the question, what I'm doing now.
Yeah.
As a pretty fresh graduate, you kind of take what you can get.
For sure.
So the jobs have been kind of varied. Been doing mostly like branding work for different types of businesses, and I guess like different industries. Like I did like an art festival, like a youth arts festival.
Oh, cool.
Did a little bit of work for like, not that it really kind of went too far, for like an engineering firm. What else? And then I also, I guess like my people, I guess like my community that I most strongly identify with would probably be the music and arts. So doing a lot of like event posters, I guess like record labels and sleeves and stuff like that.
Cool. Based on what I know of your work, that kind of makes sense.
Especially.
But I guess like then going back to that last project that I did, that was sort of like, your very last chance at in your graphic design unit to sort of to make a dent, and it probably went in a direction that wasn't ideal for my tutors. It probably wasn't what they were expecting, but I guess like as I'm sure you relate to, you start to feel the burn as you get into the last part of your
100%.
Second semester in the year. And at that point, after finishing my second project, I was like, all right, in order to keep myself into it and actually keep the productivity up, I want to work on something that I not only was interested in, but also something that I was going to be learning about every day. And that was sort of my challenge for the project, was to make stuff using programs or using other types of means that I sort of knew about but hadn't actually tried to do myself before. So it was like in totality, it was like a fictional organization that facilitates design, not necessarily just for communication design, but any type of design. Attracting people with those sort of interests in making their work, either professional work or just sort of like research work, and being able to kind of like bring these people together and share their processes and And yeah, it's sort of analogous to the way I think we've sort of kind of like sparked our relationship with each other, and the reason why we find each other interesting is because of this sort of like cross-disciplinary approach to doing our work.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's like it's a fictional project, but back then and even more so now, like I kind of think it was a blueprint for something I would love to explore a bit more while I'm still in Perth.
Yeah, yeah. It kind of felt like the beginnings of a bigger project, to be honest, when you were looking at it. Okay. What was the brief? I have to ask. Because I want to know if you kind of just like jumped off the wagon, because that's my favourite kind of brief.
You could really do anything you wanted.
Good. I love that.
You've got free reign, but the only expectations is you have to produce a certain amount of work.
Right.
So I think it was the largest of the 3 briefs you had to do throughout the year, and essentially had to create like a brand identity for a business or an organisation or anything, like an entity.
Sure.
And then beyond that, you also had to create a further rollout of deliverables that that reflects what you do in real life.
Cool.
You're going to make the identity for a business, and then that's not enough. You then have to start making the socials, the billboards, all that stuff that then relates to that central idea, but it also like it works in a way that it continues to kind of shoot off and promote it,
For sure.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, so I mean generally like people do cafes, restaurants, anything really, sporting brands, clothing brands, whatever, usually aligns with their interests. So yeah.
That's really cool. So, I mean, were you just trying to challenge yourself and push yourself? How did you end up going kind of meta and creating a design business for your design assignment?
I think the spark for it was an underlying intrigue with creating communication design using code. Yeah. So yeah, this concept of like creative coding, there's many, or even just like creative technology was at the forefront of my mind, and it was really competing with a lot of the stuff I guess we were sort of like learning and doing. Yeah. And I was like, I've got this like appetite to want to learn more about it. And there was this one book called the first edition was just called, I think, like Programming, and the second one now is called like Programming with P5JS, which is like a newer edition of the program you use for the original book. But anyway, I found this book a few years ago, and it's pretty much just like an open source guide into creating visual things with a code. And they give you the code, cool. And then beyond that, some are... You're going to
give me this book, it's relevant for my thesis.
Oh, you can get... I couldn't buy it anywhere.
Oh, really?
So I rented it out there.
In the library?
Yeah, I got it from a library. They've got both the first and the second edition of it.
Okay, awesome. That's good to know, genuinely good to know.
It's so cool, and yeah, you can reference it after as well.
Yeah.
Beyond just the book as well, they've actually got a website that has all of this ready to go for you.
That's great.
So anyway, I was like, all right, sweet. Curtin's got the book.
Yeah.
I know I wanted to do this for a while. There were a couple of people I was interning with, and they were just like, yeah, we can tell this is what you love, and like you should totally pursue it. Yeah. So I guess it's sort of how it came about. Yeah.
Love that. Yeah. That's good though. That's exactly what uni's for. It's for kind of doing things that are weird. And there's something else, I mean, it's on it, and I'll get Harrison to cut in some imagery, but I really want to show you, there's an architect that I think you're just going to absolutely froth.
Oh, is this the one from your thesis?
Francois Roche.
Very cool.
I mean, he goes by he, she, they, any pronoun, but the work that they're producing is just insane. Oh, cool, if you look at some of this kind of work, and it's a lot of it is to do with algorithms.
Yeah.
So that project that you're looking at there, this is one of my precedents for my thesis. It's all about like urban design through input of data.
Yeah.
But the data that's being inputted, he says it's like bodily secretions and like rumours and like all this kind of stuff is what's being input, and then that's what's then being secreted from this machine to build the community.
Yeah. It's strange because the form of it is like, it's not totally like digital, but it's also not totally organic.
Exactly.
It's kind of somewhere in between those two things.
It's completely synthetic intentionally, but his kind of point is like the synthetic form looks organic, which is what's really interesting.
Yeah.
And I was going to say something else on that too. I can't remember. Anyway, I just thought that you'll find it really interesting.
Oh, totally.
Because it kind of relates to that whole, what I was going to say was that came out in 2006.
Yeah.
So it's super fascinating to see that even in 2006, like those kind of on the cutting edge of design were thinking about like how is technology going to impact design more than just a design tool, but it's going to be not just the construction, but it's going to be informing the construction. Do you know what I mean?
And it's the same as this book I was talking about. Like that was from the early noughties, and in your mind you're like, whoa, this is so fresh, this is so new. It's only because you're finding it now.
Exactly.
But in reality, people have been looking into this for decades. And I guess like talking about that in particular, it's like it really comes down to, you can understand, I guess, like the process and how this stuff sort of works, but what makes, at least from what I understand, like what makes the output unique, because anyone, and that's the beauty of these open source tools, is like literally anyone can pick them up and use them.
Yeah.
But the difference between something that's a bit more bespoke or maybe a bit more functional compared to something that's just a hobby, it is the data that you're putting into it.
Yeah.
It's actually how you're using that thing. And just because anyone can get their hands on it or anyone can understand how to use it does not mean they're going to be able to produce the same type of work.
100%.
Yeah.
And that's the whole idea of like, in AI, the fear of like replacement versus like the reality of augmentation.
Yeah.
Like I feel like going into it saying they're going to replace us, especially as creatives, it's never going to happen because you can't replace creatives.
Yeah.
Because the data needs new data. Do you know what I mean? Like the algorithm needs new data, and the only way it's going to get new data is from creatives. But what creatives can use it for is augmenting like the iterative process, especially to kind of get to an outcome and used within the outcome as within your project.
And the other thing as well, it's being spoken about a lot as well, that like people are discussing the limitations of large language models, which is probably like the most common form of AI that people are interacting with now.
Yeah.
So we'll just talk about that for a second. These are models that work entirely off language, and as designers, no matter what you're kind of doing, language is only a small part, or maybe depending on what your project is, like it's a smallish part of your process. There is a lot more that goes into to creating something, especially with a physical outcome, that some of these tools don't actually have the capacity to learn and reason with. When you kind of get to that conversation of augmentation and replacement of what we do, look, it's important to note that it's a rapidly developing space, and it's really unpredictable to know what will happen within the next 5 or 10 years. However, still a small part of me thinks we'll end up seeing a shift in the way that people use our services, and probably our expectations of us. It was a part that was spoken about a bit at Perth Design Week, is like the reputation of designers, and especially I think it was in particular talking about architects, and how do we get people to, especially like with respect to Perth, like how do we get people to respect us more for what we do, whether that be like culturally or whether that be like economically, and unfortunately I guess like our integrity is being dumbed down a little bit by the AI sometimes. So that's one part that's a bit hard to.
Do you want to say anything? If you don't have anything to say, I know I'll talk.
I'm happily listening.
Okay,
so
cool.
Keep going.
Yeah. How did you enjoy Perth Design Week on that, I guess?
Yeah, I went to a couple of pretty good talks.
Did you find it relevant?
Yeah, so I think some of the topics of conversation were extremely relevant. There was one that was talking about how to make design in Perth more mainstream.
Yep.
That was good, because I think it was actually putting words to a thought that I've just noticed, that especially when you kind of travel over east, it's not as prevalent in conversation compared to in other places.
Yeah, totally.
And getting people to kind of like understand what you do. In reality, they're not going to be like Googling it and doing their own research. It's often going to come up in conversation. And through actually meeting people that do it and that they're interested in learning about.
Yeah.
So that was a good one. Otherwise, there was like a really good, you get a chance, especially as like a junior designer, to like some of these bigger agencies just sort of welcome you in. They put on a bit of a spread. They talk about really interesting things like higher order design thinking.
Yeah.
But yeah, it kind of made me. I met one of the ladies, I think one of the organisers at that How to Make Perth, Design Perth more mainstream, and she was like, "Oh yeah, you should drop me a line and see whether you could kind of do something next year." And I was just thinking that on the way here, I might send her an email just see should. Like I think from like the perspective of like a younger person that's just interested in this stuff, whether you're actually like whether you care about design or not. Like I think there's something in that mix of like broader culture, younger like youth culture that's involved in design, and then also like what role does technology have to play in all of those different levels as well. So did either of you get to go to any of the...
we went to the opening. Did you go to anything else?
No, I could only get to the opening because it was right before our first thesis submission, which I was kind of kicking myself for, but there's not really much you can do outside of it, unfortunately. I did hear there were a couple really interesting talks. There was one that I was kind of kicking myself that I'd missed, where they kind of discussed like cost of living, but like kind of also more from the construction side of things, and like even I think it was Nick Bronston was the one who led the conversation. He was talking about how in Perth right now the average household has 3.8 bedrooms and 1.8 people living in it, or something insane like that. And that kind of statistic is just like, I mean, it's also relevant for like someone like you as a designer, because it means that these people, I mean, they need guidance, and that's because where they're getting guidance from are money-driven people, which there's absolutely no hate to real estate agents. They are doing their job, which is to make the most money. That's what their job is. But as designers, our role is more kind of, I guess, people-focused than money-led, where it's really about like how can we give you the best outcome, regardless of my kind of design opinion. What will be best for you?
100%. I think I heard about this talk as well, and I guess on a concept level, what you're talking about is like resources competing with the Australian dream. A lot of people come here, like my parents, my grandparents, like they came here from countries and had the space and the resources to be able to live in a different way than they were back where they were born. And it seems like we've still kind of got enough resources at the moment for people to be able to continue pursuing this, like white picket fence, big backyard, pool, 3 bedrooms and everything, which is totally excessive. But I mean, maybe a sign of it slowing down is actually the the cost of rentals, the demand for rentals and houses. It's a bit freaky at the moment. But anyway, I heard from this talk. They were discussing. You probably know the word, like I guess just like more condensed living, more like compact living compared to everyone. Having one of the biggest. Someone even said the other day, Perth's like one of the biggest cities in the world.
We are the longest city in the world.
I thought it was second longest. I thought Chicago was longer.
Is it? Okay, I thought we were the longest, but maybe we're battling with Chicago.
I mean, we're much more spread out than Asia.
But we're certainly a much lower density than Chicago.
Densify is a word.
But I guess it's sort of like, that's more within your realm, but I was hearing that sort of stuff and it sort of like clicked for me. I was like, true, like...
But it impacts you too.
Yeah, so, I mean, I guess on that, when you're kind of talking about what your role is and what do you bring to the table when people are considering something like, I want to get a house, I want to build a business. You do have to have, you've got to have a variety of selling points and real conviction as to why people should be spending money. I mean, that was part of the conversation.
Absolutely.
It's like, when what you do isn't really respected by a lot of people, how on earth are you going to be able to convince them to pay you a certain amount? Even if you're like a well-regarded architect or well-regarded designer, it's like, I could be charging these rates in other places around the world, but I'm here, I'm trying to make things work here. How am I going to be able to convince people that don't have the same level of, like understanding that my time is worth this much? So it's... if you really want to commercialize your work, if you're someone that cares about making money from the work that you do, these are all really, really important questions.
Totally. And I'm sure like you even feel it too, like when you're having discussions with people, especially like businesses, branding is kind of the most important thing. Like you can have a good product, but if no one sees that product and if the branding around it doesn't look good, no one cares.
I mean,
do you know what I mean? Like,
I do. I mean, I think that's what that's what graphic designers in particular, want you to think.
Yeah, okay.
And look, it is the case some of the time, but another part of, one of the other jobs, a part of a designer, is also analysing the product, or analysing the business that someone has. And I think you've got to be honest with them sometimes as well. And you've got to be honest in terms of the type of target audience you're going to. You might have a product, and the person who invented that product or came up with that product is like, I want to be able to show it to this amount of people, to all these people. And you're looking at it and it's like, why are we going to sell this incredibly beautiful shaver to bald men? It doesn't, and there's moments like that where it's like, someone comes to you and they're like, I want you to make me this extravagant packaging for this thing, and I'm going to give you this money for it. I think it's also your responsibility to be like, look, like, you don't need this extravagant packaging when your audience isn't going to give a shit about the packaging. Mm-hmm. You might as well, we may as well reconsider where you can invest that money in other places where it's going to be more useful. So I guess like...
That's a super architectural way of thinking. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of like, I mean, for at least myself, that's kind of how I definitely approach architecture is, a client can come to you with a brief going back to the kind of 4-bedroom conversation, right? And say, I want 4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, but it's just them and their husband and they're retiring. And it's like, do you need this? What do you love? Oh, you love gardening? Yeah. Why don't we give you plenty of space for a beautiful garden out the back? Why don't you save that money and have, a really good integrated retic system, because you're getting older, you're not going to be able to stand up and water, but then you can still prune. Yeah. It's the same conversation. It's just a different package.
Yeah, you've got to be responsible. And I think...
and that's your role as a design professional. That's your value.
Yeah. I mean, not everyone's going to think that way. Yeah. And I can't vouch to say I've actually made a lot of these, like, good karma kind of decisions in my work. But, you've got to kind of... you've got to hold yourself to account if you can. And I like to think that, in terms of building a reputation, people are going to... they're going to remember you a lot more... based off the outcome of your design over a longer period of time.
I agree with that.
And like, better outcomes always come from better design decisions from an earlier part of the process, right?
100%.
If you're just going to be doing something that's a money grab, that's great for like a short period of time, then when the wheels start to fall off 1 or 2 years down the track, people are going to be like, I'm never going to work with them again. Like, this is what's happened.
And I'm going to tell my friends not to work with them.
Totally.
Yeah, totally. Do you have any questions? Or are you just here for a good time?
I'm here for a good time.
Okay, that's fine.
That's something I want to talk about later, but that'll be once we're done with this topic.
Okay.
So, yeah.
I mean, if you want to ask a question, you can ask a question, yeah.
That's okay.
What was on your mind?
Yeah.
So when you brought up like other countries, I was wondering, how did you get into the retroactive exhibition? Because you did a lot of graphics for that, right?
Oh, yeah.
Sort of. That was an opportunity put forward through Curtin. Leah Dent, who is one of the, one of the directors or one of the founders of Studio Bomba, who's been contracted by the DBE to do. They did the retroactive brand, and they also made the brand for the building and not for the building, but for the.
For like Gradfest and all that, or
even just like for the whole design built environment, like the department.
Oh, nice.
Are they like an internal team? Because I know there's like different shows and stuff that happen, and they always seem to have like branding downstairs.
I think they're contracted externally, but both. So there's Mel, and there's also Mel's the other person, aside from Leah, and Mel is probably still working as a tech down at the design thing. So they're both actually involved here at the uni. Leah's been here for a longer time. She was like my first tutor.
Right.
Shout out if she's listening. I don't know. But they're. I think they're just kind of contracted through the uni. But then look at all this like beautiful stuff here, and like they've got like great budgets and great resources to like do pretty memorable events here, and it goes to show why they trust someone like Leah and Mel to do that job for them. So that was, and so anyway, ended up interning with them for that project in particular. So they had already created the brand identity, and then I guess like my job was to assist with the rollout of that in this space, to do the spatial design of like the exhibition space. Excuse me. exhibition space. And then also just some of the motion graphics and stuff. So just kind of making the brand talk and making it a bit more live.
Cool. That's so cool.
Yeah, that's because I remember. So Retroactive was an NCP celebration basically. So it was showing off the different trips that students got to go on, and that whole thing was such a fun night. Did you end up going to it? Or?
No, but I think again it was just submission time.
Yeah.
You know what I'm like. I just kind of go into a little rabbit hole. But I remember seeing all the branding around the building and the little motion graphics and stuff they had on the screens downstairs.
Yeah,
it was good.
Cool. It was cool.
Yeah.
They did. I would say that the rollout was very good because even though I wasn't going and I'm not directly related to NCP, I still heard about it around the building, which is what you want, right?
Definitely.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah. That was good.
Were they also involved with the 201 farewell band?
201.
The old
building.
Old building.
Were you in the old building?
I guess you wouldn't have been.
Where was the old building?
So it's right next to the library. Yeah. So the old architecture building. The big concrete one.
The one that everyone's like,
one.
that building sucks. That building, which we love.
I had some of my like early classes there. Not they weren't design related. They were just like more, like essential units you had to do.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Wait, why a farewell? What's happened to it?
So we used to be in that building.
Oh,
yeah.
Right,
So
right,
when this building
yes.
opened, we moved into here. So we had a big farewell. It was pretty extravagant. Reminded me of the Retroactive one with the mouse stuff that was going on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a fun time.
No, I don't think I was there for the farewell.
Yeah.
No.
That's right. Because that was a cute little thing. And they, because you know how on level 2 and 3 there's the blue walls with the classrooms?
Like their pin-up boards.
Pin-up boards. Yeah. That's to kind of pay homage where we used to do pin-ups in the old building. It was called the blue carpet level, which you'll never believe it had blue carpet.
Yeah.
And so the point of the blue walls is to kind of pay homage to the blue carpet level.
Okay.
To kind of, because that was where we would go to pin up. And so I think, like, my tutors at least, some of them still say we're going to go pin up on blue carpet, even though it's not a carpet, it's a pin-up board.
Yep. So here we've got a piece of the carpet.
Oh, yeah.
I saw that.
Yeah. That's what that is.
Yeah. It looks kind of faded right now. That just shows how old it is.
Yeah, it's really
lots of memories
old.
here.
Probably very dirty carpet, but they just
keep it sealed for a reason.
They just cut up little pieces of carpet and you get it framed.
I mean, that place was, it felt like Hogwarts. Like, you walk in there and there's just like staircases everywhere. And I would have spent hours going to and from different levels, to and from different doors to actually find where my classroom was. It wasn't super easy to do that. Hey,
getting lost in that building was one of my favorite things when I was in like first or second year. And finding all the secret rooms.
And you had to remember what level you were on to know which toilet you needed to go to, because I alternated on each floor.
oh god.
See, I still think that was good design though.
I think it was good design too.
Because it means like if I'm on one end of the building, I only have to go up one floor. I don't have to walk to the other end to get to the toilet I need to go to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because there wasn't really enough to have both the men's and the women's on the one side, and then if you're on the other side of the building, you would have had to walk all the way to the other side. So the way they did it is, say you're on, this floor, and you were a woman and it was only the men's, you could go up one or down one to get to the women's, and so you didn't have to walk all the way to the other side.
And so
So it was a bit confusing, but ultimately, I mean, you kind of grow to love it, and like if you kind of get intuition for it, which you shouldn't have to build intuition for a building. That's probably not the mark of good design, but you kind of felt like a little, I don't know, sense of achievement when it was just kind of intuition. You were like, oh, I'm part of this building now. Do you know what I mean? It was kind of like a rite of passage.
Yeah, it felt like we also had a lot of, I guess, like domestication over that building. We could sort of make it into a space we wanted. I remember going there for all-nighters and seeing a bunch of friends also doing the same, uncoordinated. We just all be there. It was sort of just a culture that was established, and it was very nice though.
Oh, everyone, I think there's a lot of like alumni from years and years ago, but all of them say it's got a pretty special place. They're like, oh, yeah, that building, and I was like, what about it? Like, but they all seem to have enjoyed the time.
We were allowed to run a bit more rampant through that building.
Oh yes,
because it was an old building, so no one really cared. And so I think I slept there a lot, to be honest. Just bring, go with the anticipation that you're going to be sleeping overnight. Bring a toothbrush, bring a pillow, bring a blanket, sleep on the floor, you'll be right.
That's why I've got a sleeping corner over
there. But you
do
it with friends, so it kind of turns into like a little bit of a slumber party at uni.
Yeah, I think it's great. I think also like, I mean, that's why I loved hanging out up here.
Yeah.
Being around all of you, because you would go hard at it, and there is always there's something really weird and a little bit twisted about that part of like of working hard at uni is that shared feeling of like what you're kind of going through is what sort of keeps you going through. And that's why it's like, once again, it's super important to have, like, even if you've got one buddy or just a couple buddies throughout your time that you can actually like either speak to over the phone or be with in person when you're doing those like all-nighters and stuff.
It's just even good to have someone who like notices that you haven't been at class for a week and just like sends you a text or calls you and it's like, hey, are you doing okay? Like you weren't at class today. Like that can be, especially, I mean, I know your degree is also full on, but especially like for us in architecture, like a lot of people, especially in like the lower years, burn out real fast.
Let's be clear, like especially when I was down in the computer labs, I think I made a couple of friends that were doing maybe their fourth year. But they would have been younger than me. They would have been like 23, 24 or something. And but I could just see it, like the fire in their eyes, like and they were there like working tirelessly. They were what were we talking about again? We're talking about
burnout.
Burnout. The difference between like architecture, I would see the work that they were doing, like they're fine, like they'd kind of get to the end of to the point of submission when they would go and render things out and and also the broad skill set that a lot of them had. I'm sorry, like, I just got the feeling that that the I guess just like the difficulty of my work, like, which is different to say the amount of time I can still spend doing my work compared to your type of work. I truly feel like the difficulty of their work was more so than what we had to do. Seriously,
they're just different demands because they're different courses. You know what I mean?
I mean, and it all goes back. I remember, like, and this is going back to, God, I don't know, like, into the 15th, 16th century or whatever. And I guess like architecture at one point was regarded, and probably still is regarded to today, as like the penultimate form of design. It's what informs many other types of, I guess, and back in the time it was purely physical. But one of the, at least from what I understand, like part of the reason why it's considered the ultimate form is because there are so many more considerations that have to go into building. And then also like building not only functionally but beautifully. And this is like going back to Roman architecture and Gothic architecture and stuff. It's like, and you see these buildings that have stood for hundreds of years or thousands of years, and it's like, I'm sorry, I'm more than happy to subscribe to this idea that some of the work that you guys got to do is in architecture, and especially student architecture. Oh my god, I can understand.
It gets to a point where you start just doing it out of passion, because I know in my third year I had that big burnout and I was I lost that passion for a while, and then I took my time off. I came back and I just having that passion. I was just doing it out of the fun of doing it. I was doing it because I wanted to be around my friends who were doing the same thing and just supporting each other.
You got to be self-motivated. That's just the nature of the courses. You have to be self-motivated, and that's part of like why like us and Med are two of the only buildings on campus that I see like consistently lights on. Exactly. It's just part of the culture, and like you said, that's part of why friends are so important on campus, because you kind of need people to be accountable with you to make sure that you don't burn yourself out, because like Harrison said, it's super easy to get that burnout. I don't know any architecture student who hasn't been burnt out, and like majorly, like to the point of like potential like medical concerns, you know what I mean? Just because the culture is so like go, you've really got to watch out for yourself and your friends and make sure that you're giving yourself time to rest. Because it's important.
Definitely.
It's part of why I'm doing my master's part-time, was because third year, that same kind of burnout, I went into master's first semester, started doing it full-time, and just went, I can't do this. I'd lost all passion. I didn't want to design. I didn't want to do anything.
I mean, what got you both into it in the first place?
Lego.
Oh, cool.
Lego?
Cool. Good answer.
That's all we need.
Honestly, what got me into architecture was my friend told me to. And there's a bit more to it than just that. I had planned for all of my high school life that I really wanted to be a chemist. And I wanted to be an analytical chemist, which would have meant like forensics. Because like I love investigation, right? And so I wanted to go, I was like, in my mind, that's kind of the only way that you can get into that kind of investigative world was through forensics, and I loved chemistry, so it just kind of seemed like a natural place to end up. I went and I spoke to someone and I said, look, realistically, where am I going to end up? And they're like, look, you'll be in a lab testing the purity of substances. And that was her exact wording. And I remember going, oh, okay, that's probably not for me. And I was with a friend and he saw my face drop and he was like, let's go find what you're going to do. And this, keep in mind, is like 2 weeks out from, submitting your preferences for uni or whatever. And I was like, what am I going to do now? This is what I've been working for like the last 5-6 years. Why am I doing methods? What have I gotten myself in for? And then we walked past our beautiful old Love 201 and he was like, why don't you just go in and talk to someone and see what architecture's like? And I spoke to someone, I think they showed me like a model and I was like, yeah, that's kind of cool, I'll do that. And that was it.
It doesn't always have to be a really like, really profound and this is the seed was planted many years ago.
My ancestors.
Why did you choose to do graphic design?
Yeah.
I think it's actually something like to do with both of those things, right? Like, I guess like technically, I'd finished one degree and then I had a little bit of a gap and I was like, I don't know what to do. And then I kind of caught up with a friend for coffee and he'd just finished like doing advertising and design at Curtin and he kind of told me about it and I was like, sick, this looks cool. But at a deeper level, I think like I think just my fascination with like computers, with like I guess like graphic, like just kind of like GPUs and like displays and stuff, and also just being able to like used to love being able to customize stuff, like jailbreak stuff,
love.
Which finally, like, I think that has a bit to do with this, like, being able to understand the, like, the source code or just sort of, like, the building blocks of something that is actually so complex and so beautiful, but being able to understand it from a very fundamental level means you're able to kind of, like, I guess, influence all of the variables that then create this really beautiful thing. Which really comes from the, like, when I was lucky enough to get an iPod Touch and like everything was so like set in a place the way that Apple kind of keeps things, and I was like, I want to change the wallpaper, I want to change the interface, I want to be able to do this, that and the other, and like and I think without realizing it, that was the sort of stuff that influenced me, or just sort of like subconsciously kind of pushed me into pursuing design.
That's cool.
Graphic design, communication design, I think is like, it's a good starting point. I don't think it's going to be like what I want to like continue doing forever. But I don't know if you feel the same way, but it's like, I'm just kind of like, I'm really glad to be within the industry. I'm really glad to kind of be at the very beginning of a journey where you're kind of learning to think in this way, and you're learning how can this sort of work, bring better things to the world.
I think I spoke about this last time. I feel like you would be very good in architecture, because even the way that you were discussing design before, you do think quite architecturally, especially with your kind of approach to like the people-led part of design.
Jeez, okay.
But I mean, you don't have to do architecture. I just think that you think, what is your first degree, by the way?
That's a unique thought. My first degree before was law.
Okay, interesting. That's a very rigid thing I wouldn't have expected from you.
Oh yeah, well I mean it was probably similar to you at school. Like I was doing, chemistry and physics, and like
what you thought you needed to do.
Well, yeah, I mean, but I guess you're just kind of being pushed in this one direction, and I can't help but think like how things would be different if from an earlier age there had been like the teachers and stuff, but even like I don't know, like even just anyone that was sort of around me in that sort of sense that were like pushing me to pursue creative stuff.
Did you do any creative stuff through school? Like were we into music or?
I've always sort of I've always like taken a big interest into music. Like I DJ'd as a kid, and I'm still kind of doing it now and running music events and stuff.
Nice.
Which has always been a great sort of like I don't know, a hobby, but like sort of like a big part of my creative expression. But yeah, I mean. Technically my journey sort of started when I started my undergraduate, play around with Photoshop and whatever, but I think when you got to really start like seriously reading and learning and practicing in order for you to start like getting your skates on,
Yeah, totally. What about like languages or anything at school? I'm just trying to figure out like where does the two parts of your brain come in?
I really don't know.
No, that's so interesting.
I still think I'm still very skeptical of myself as like a creative person. People are like, you're so creative, and I'm like, I know myself better than anyone else, and I do not think I'm creative.
That's so fascinating.
Yeah.
Because your work was incredibly inspiring for me when I saw it. Because maybe it's because I also think quite similarly to you, which we're kind of picking from this conversation, having that kind of more sciencey, analytical background.
Yeah.
Like I said, analytical chemistry. Like that's exactly what I wanted to do, analytics.
Yeah.
And then implementing that into design.
Yeah.
Which is, again, why I find work like Roche's so fascinating, which is that very kind of calculated design that's coming out with these really interesting, organic, like, I don't know, outcomes, which is kind of what that last project that we were talking with you about was, right? Like, it's a very synthetic design process
100%.
That's coming out with very organic outcomes. And there's something kind of fun and just like a little bit silly about that, which is what I like.
Yeah. Well, I think it's important for all students and anyone that's learning to do this sort of stuff to think out. I don't want to say that. I want to say for them to just like step outside of the expected or the mainstream way of producing your work.
Yeah.
Or even at least having some time to think about what other ways do people make things outside of it. I mean, within my kind of field, it's like the Adobe suite.
Yeah.
People use Canva, people use Figma. There's a reason why all of these products are very popular and why they're an industry standard.
Yeah.
However, your work is not going to become more novel or more exciting, in my opinion, until you start thinking of other ways that you can, whether you're producing the exact same thing as you would on a different program, or whether it's something completely different. That's I only speak for myself. That's how I've kind of learnt to make lateral moves.
No, I love that, because what I love about like uni is you have a chance to experiment with so many different things, and at the end, like for architecture, your projects are not going to get built that you do in undergrad most of the time. But like that, you have that opportunity to explore like super crazy things and do the most wild ideas that you want. Like I remember Justin telling first years, make a building out of chocolate, see what happens, and just being able to go crazy like
use
that.
pigs as insulation is another thing that we were told. Like just do pigs as insulation, but then you have to think about how you're going to feed the pigs. What happens if one dies, how you're going to get it out, because that's the question, right? Like do silly things, but don't make it silly. Give it a realistic, think about it. And that's what's kind of fun that's what is fun about architecture, at least, is, you're told, do whatever you want, but make me believe that it's possible. Do you know what I mean? And it doesn't have to be realistic. You just have to explain how you want to do it.
I think that's kind of like a earlier undergraduate part of me. When you kind of get set some absolutely ridiculous brief. What's the point? What's this got anything to do with architecture? But it's only in hindsight that you realise it's this like it's approaching a problem from a very, very different perspective. That's the lesson that they're trying to teach you, right?
For sure.
That you don't get the luxury of doing that all the time.
No.
But I mean, you can do it as much as you want. That's why it's really important to like be passionate about, to love what you do, because you're gonna have the work that pays the bills. But the great designers are the ones that I really look up to. These are people that work tirelessly. They're like always, that they at the start of their journey, like they're doing work that is interesting to them, and then if they persist through it and usually through sheer hard work, but also like a bit of like a vision, and usually these people also like very well thought out designers as well. Their work eventually becomes commercialized. People see the value in it.
Absolutely.
But you're never going to get there unless you like commit to this like, I'm just going to try and find a little bit of time every week or every month, every year to expand my horizon and just kind of like keep thinking of different ways to do stuff. Because otherwise you've just got tunnel vision, you'll produce the same crap, and your portfolio is just going to, that's great. It's like, there's going to be, I guess there's like a few different schools of thought of this from what I notice as someone that's sort of just meeting people in the industry. Like, you can play it safe, you can give yourself a skill set that's going to really like, it's going to pay here in Perth, a place that I guess kind of has I don't know. I don't know this for sure, but I get the impression it's like a pretty conservative design language. We talked about this at like Perth Design Week, like, and there are reasons why it's a bit more conservative and why there are cities or other countries around the world that have a much more colourful design language. But you can kind of like gear your skill set towards that stuff. You take a bit more of a risk if you want to deviate from that. From that, I guess that recipe, you know. But yeah.
I remember you saying you wanted to go over east for a bit at some point. Do you still want to do that, or? I
mean, I was there for 3 months during my summer break.
Ooh, nice.
Between my second and third year. That was cool. I was doing an internship over there. And yeah, that was a really, really awesome experience. But yeah, you really kind of get that feel of, I mean, I think just like plainly, there's a lot more opportunity to find work over there. You're also likely to meet, no matter what your like area of interest in, you're going to find more like-minded people there. For other many reasons, but it's sort of my backup plan right now. I really want to try and make things work here. I would love to be able to work in an agency or a couple of agencies here. Cool. Start my I guess my journey here. But yeah, if things don't really get going after a year or something, then I'll probably end up just going over east or going overseas. Yeah.
That's super fair enough. Because even you see, again, within the branding of, you know, companies coming out from places like Melbourne, and I think that's why there's a lot of successful startups coming out from Melbourne, because all of their brands have a really strong identity and it's really recognizable, and you kind of want to side with them because they've obviously put time into their design, but a lot of the designs that are coming out are very people focused in terms of the people behind the companies are very very front facing within the advertisement and that kind of thing, which I think is very fascinating. So I think you're totally on it. I think they're a lot more, I don't know, kind of forward thinking in terms of how people think about business, especially like the Gen Z, Gen Alpha, what they want to see from businesses, which ultimately they're your future consumers. So that is really who you need to be thinking about marketing towards.
I went to a number of talks just about and they were actually mostly in architecture. There was the dude that runs that UN architecture firm, UN. I think it's called UN.
OMA?
No. They were building this massive...
UN?
I think he was Dutch or something.
Okay.
And then there were also...
we'll go for a design week and include like a picture of
it. I'm pretty sure, because it was like, you know, UN, like United Nations. That's how I remembered it. But anyway, the point of what I was going to say was like... And even from like papers that I've read, it seems quite clear that especially the universities there... really like they're really onto getting some of the more forward-thinking people, like scholars 100%. And workers from around the world there, Melbourne Uni and Monash and stuff. There was just like, I think I was just sitting at work, and I was like, I'm just gonna go on like Eventbrite and just kind of look at the stuff that was on. I was like, wanting to learn more about I guess like artificial intelligence in design, and I was just like my jaw dropped with how many talks were happening over the space of like 2 weeks. Like going. But it seems like there seems to be a lot of like technologically focused and also like a lot of people working at this intersection between design and technology there.
100%.
Which it's not possible to find here.
And I think that Perth Design Week was kind of comforting in a way. Like, because again, whilst I wasn't able to attend the talks just because of time, it was comforting to look through the like different lists of talks and go, wow, like these are some really forward-thinking conversations that are happening, and that's really exciting to see that it's happening in Perth.
Oh, I know.
Yeah, it kind of, like you said, it can feel quite, I don't know, like you can kind of feel a bit discouraged when you're thinking about going into the Perth scene because it seems so conservative, but those conversations are kind of motivating to go, well, maybe there is opportunity for me here and I don't have to go, well, then I have to move over east. You know what I mean? Which is kind of the mindset for a lot of like Perth students is, you know, where am I going to find work that aligns with, you know, my values and what I want to be as a designer. So it's cool to see those conversations.
Oh, it is, you know, and I think there's certain people that are like, you know, you'll start up here and then you go out outside in the world, And then some people might come back and import a lot of that knowledge and experience back here. You know, I think that's amazing, and it's the only way that you're going to be able to, not the only way, but a part of the way that you're going to be able to keep developing and growing design here is you need to have people that others look up to, you know, that are truly doing like amazing work, whether they recognize it at this point or whether they recognize it in 3 or 5 years' time, you know, who's that, like Bulgarian architect, that has all the houses here, Hungarian or Bulgarian guy, you guys gotta know,
I am so bad with names.
Has all the they're just like residential homes.
Oh, does he have one in City Beach?
Yeah.
Yeah. I know who you're talking about. I just don't know his name.
Iwan Ivanhoff.
Oh, there we go. Yeah.
You know, like so like these are.
I didn't know where he was from. There you go. Yeah.
Or I guess I bring his name up because it's like, you know, these are artifacts of design that have stood the test of time here. And it's like I actually have no idea like whether they were revered at the time they were actually made. Or whether it's just now it's like they're on Perth is okay, or like, you know, but
his name is everywhere.
And it's just sort of like, man, that, like I really like them, but it's like I wonder if he had the same amount of rep then as he does now. And it's like, and then it kind of made me think like, how many things do we have here that are just like artifacts of their time design? Like there's not really heaps, and you really need people to make things for this city. You know, that is that has the culture and just sort of has like the living aspect of Perth built within it for people to really look at it and be like, oh my god.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I totally agree with that. And there's this one house, I wish I could remember like who it was designed by, but it was designed by an architect, I believe, for his parents, and it sold last year in Netherlands, I want to say. But it's the only house that I've ever looked at and went, wow, that's a Perth house. Because it was beautiful. I believe it was Jarrah, like a lot of timber, like this massive kind of atrium living space with kind of like this walkway going around it, and then these big, like, they were voluminous bedrooms, but not like to the point where they felt massive. It was just kind of more like tall ceilings, lots of windows looking out to like plants all around the property, and they were all like natives. Like it felt very like this was a house that's just kind of meant to be here. Do you know what I mean? And that's so hard to find in Perth. And that's kind of like, personally, I'm thinking about like, can I find somewhere to work down south? Because for me, when I think of WA, I think of down south. And so, you know, in terms of where I want to live, I don't really want to live in suburbia because that doesn't really align with my design values. And I know, like, you know, you don't really get a choice in this economy. But if I do get to choose, I'd love to move down south. But again, where do I find work? And that's kind of, you know, that's such a hard conversation to have as well.
It's funny, I think you're probably like the third or fourth person now of friends that I've got that are either studying or have like graduated that all have like either some of their projects at school were based around that, or they aspire to be able to, you know, have your independent firm and just live down south and build houses like commercial or just residential for people.
And it's not even about a big, like I want a tiny house. I don't even care if it's like a tiny piece of land. I just want to be able to like grow my own plants, you know, have just enough space for what I need, nothing too big. I don't want to clean, which is part of why I don't get big houses. Like, why would I want to clean empty bedrooms? That makes no sense to me. But like, you know, but then with more space comes more consumption, right? That's, you know, so many conversations as to why I'd want to have just like a small place, you know, kind of designed well and just whatever that means to me, and then just kind of enjoy a quieter life. I mean, maybe that is part of like, you know, the burnout of architecture is you then kind of aspire to like a quieter living after study. But then the inverse, right, is true. Like, if it's not that, I want to live like in a tiny apartment in Melbourne. Do you know what I mean? Like, I want the two poles. I think I'm just done with suburbia.
Fair enough.
Just want to be cozy.
Yeah.
Oh, there's a whole world out there, and yeah, I don't know. It's like we are truly blessed to be able to be here.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, I think like it's just, as we, you know, kind of circling back to what we were talking about before, like a huge part of design is experiential. Yeah. And you need to be able to go out and see those things, I think, to get your inspiration and to continue to grow and develop. You're not going to get a lot of that somewhere that you've been around for like a long time. You're sort of like been there, done that. So I think that sort of makes sense.
And that's why I think that design, regardless if it's for architecture or whatever, like to travel is part of being a good designer, because traveling isn't just about going and talking to other designers. It's just about seeing, like, I guess, native design. Like, what do street signs look like in Cambodia? What does a advertisement in a newspaper look like in Laos? Do you know what I mean? Like, totally. What do different international people think of when they think of good design? And you're not going to get that through conversation. You just get that through walking down a street and seeing what people are drawn towards.
Yeah.
And even like on that whole conversation of Ivan Ivanov and, what kind of, do people revere him when just now, or was it, previously revered as well? It's the same kind of conversation with Van Gogh, right? Like, he never sold an artwork in his lifetime, and it was only kind of, valued after he died. And that's another fascinating conversation, right? Like, his work is now everywhere and it's worth millions of dollars, but he didn't sell anything during his lifetime.
Yeah.
And then the conversation is like, was he ahead of his time, or did tastes just change? And it's an interesting kind of conversation.
It's important, I think, especially within this sort of like, if you're going to be doing work or pursuing work that is outside of the mainstream where you live, on the daily or on the weekly, like, you're going to be questioning yourself, you're going to have other people questioning you.
Yeah.
You're going to be thinking, is this absolutely insane? Am I wasting my time doing this? Or, like, do I have the perseverance to see this out and know there's value there? And eventually it'll be realised. But right now I have to kind of sit with this, like, even just like with that last thing I did, my portfolio, like, was that the best work for me to then, like, go out and get a job? Absolutely not. My teachers told me that, like, a lot of people were kind of like, oh, that's neat, that's cool. And I'm like, you kidding me? Like, this is the coolest thing I've done. Most people are just, there's some people that sort of see it, and then there are most other people that are just sort of like, and even in those classes, they're just like, nice. And it's like, I just, I poured my heart and soul into this presentation, and it's like, that's all I get.
I feel like you can tell. Like, I look at it and I get really excited. I get that not everyone feels that way.
Yeah, and that's why, like, and that's just sort of like a lesson you learn pretty early is like, I think a big part of making it work for yourself is you've got to be able to, be patient. You've got to work persistently and trust your instinct, trust your intuition in what you do.
Yeah.
But it's not so easy.
Yeah. No, I think that kind of interdisciplinary design is really interesting, where you're looking to kind of more computer sciencey STEM kind of inspirations and integrating that into design.
Yeah.
I think while people don't get it now, I don't think that's going to be the case forever, and I think you're going to start seeing it start emerging more, especially as AI grows more prevalent. We already think it's big. Yeah. It's only going to get bigger though.
Well, and it's also like on the other side of the coin for the whole, designing in Perth conversation. Although things are like, although it's a small pond, your I guess like sphere of influence as a medium to big size fish is a lot more profound here compared to somewhere where it's like a massive pond.
Yeah.
Like over east. And this is like, we will talk about it when it comes to music and events and, but any kind of creative pursuit or professional pursuit. I think you stand to gain a lot more here than you would somewhere where there's a lot more people like you doing it. So.
Yeah. All right.
My computer's about to die.
That's all right. We'll wrap up. Yeah. It's been about an hour, so that's pretty solid anyway. Yeah.
Sweet.
Well, thank you for coming and talking to us. That was really fun.
Thanks for taking the time. Hey, and that was actually exactly more what I was kind of hoping to talk about. So thanks for having me on. Thanks for also being the kind of people with open ears.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we'll leave it open because I'll give opportunity for people to ask you questions too. And if we get any interesting questions come through, maybe even we'll just get you to write us some responses, something cool like that. Because I kind of smell a lot of younger students, especially once we put some of your work out there, will be entertained by it, and so hopefully that will be motivating for you as someone who hasn't necessarily had the reception that I think your work warrants personally. I think a lot of younger students, especially in our course, there's a lot of push towards like mid-journey and that kind of thing. And so I think you'll see a lot of like younger students especially getting really inspired and then they're going to be the ones emerging in the Perth scene. So I definitely think it's going to change.
Where would you recommend students go to check out your work? Because we'll definitely include that in the description.
Yeah, you can either, I'm like slowly getting my work up on my Instagrams. My handle is just james.jovanoski.
Okay.
And then my website is up as well, so that's just jamesjovanoski.com.
That's a fun ride as well.
Yeah, the website was a fun part of my capstone project. So it's entertaining, I'll put it that way.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you so much, James.
Thank you so much. And that's episode 6 done.
Beautiful.